It should have been the proudest moment of my career. 5 months of 15-hour days, burnt coffee at midnight, the steady hum of the server room that felt more like home than my own apartment. Every bug found, every dollar accounted for, every sleepless night stacked like bricks in the fortress I thought I was building for us, me and Mariah. We were supposed to be a team. Her and I both invested in making this company thrive. But in the end, I realized team meant something different to everyone else here. When I started on the Orion Logistics project, I knew it would be a game changer. Orion was the client that would push our little tech consultancy into the stratosphere. The numbers didn't lie. Double the revenue in a single year. I could almost see the figures glowing in my head every time I closed my eyes. Every morning, I hit the office before the sun rose, my breath visible in the pre-dawn chill, my mind sharper than the coffee's bitter sting. I'd sit down at my battered laptop, notes stacked high, and build the system that would make Orion's supply chain run like a dream, like a symphony in code. I knew every line of that proposal better than my own reflection. So when Raymond, my father-in-law, CEO of Vertex Consulting, the man who sat at the head of every meeting like a benevolent dictator, walked over with that practiced grin, I didn't even flinch. "Adrian," he said, placing a hand on my laptop like a priest, blessing an altar, "I'll handle the client meeting. You're not senior enough to lead something this high stakes." I stared at his hand. For a second, I thought he left a fingerprint on the brushed aluminum, a mark that would remind me of who really ran this place. My throat went dry. "But I built this," I managed. The words were small, flat, even to my own ears. His smile didn't falter. "You did excellent work, son, but Martin and Celeste will be joining me today. They're better suited for this level of client engagement." He used that tone, the one that made you feel like you were being patted on the head, like I was the helpful nephew who'd carried the luggage, but couldn't possibly sit at the grown-up table. I watched as he scooped up my slides, the ones I'd sweated over for weeks, each bullet point, each diagram, each line of logic, gone from my screen and in his hands. My chest tightened. I wanted to snatch them back. I wanted to stand up and shout that they didn't know the system like I did, that they'd never understand the intricacies of the dynamic allocation protocol or the machine learning adaptation layers I designed specifically for Orion's decentralized clusters. But all that came out was a thin, bitter laugh. He nodded, satisfied, then pivoted on his polished shoes and motioned for Martin and Celeste to follow him. Martin, who'd once asked me how to reset his corporate laptop password. Celeste, who wore her MBA like armor and couldn't tell a CQL injection from a bottle of ketchup. They both smiled at me as they passed, quick little barbs of courtesy that barely masked the relief that they'd been chosen. And I hadn't, as the conference room door swung shut behind them. I was left with the echo of my own pulse in my ears. I sat back down at my desk. The cheap chair squeaked beneath me. I stared at the blank screen where my slides used to be. The cursor blinked at me, like it was waiting for instructions. Through the glass wall, I could see them. Raymond at the head of the table, Martin gesturing like a puppet, Celeste flipping through my slides with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never written a line of code in her life. My stomach churned. I wanted to stand up. Walk in there. Tell them what they were missing. That without me, the system was a shell, a polished car without an engine. I thought of the nights Mariah and I spent arguing over my hours, the dinners missed, the birthdays I'd sent apologies for, the sacrifices I made for this company, for her family, for us. And here I was, locked out of the most important meeting of my life. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and closed my eyes. I could almost hear Raymond's voice, smooth as velvet, telling the Orion team about the future of logistics, about Vertex's capabilities. all while standing on the foundation I built. Every word he spoke, stolen from the sweat on my brow. I pictured Martin explaining the technical framework. Badly. I pictured Celeste fielding questions with that brittle confidence that only held until someone asked something real. Then I saw her, Dr. Eliza Morgan, CTO of Orion Logistics. Arms crossed, expression unreadable, eyes sharp, dissecting every word they said. My heart kicked up a notch. Eliza Morgan didn't suffer fools. I'd read everything about her, her patents, her research, her ruthless climb through the industry ranks. She was the one who insisted on a technical deep dive during the pitch, the one who specifically requested the lead engineer, the one I should have been talking to. But here I was, on the other side of the glass, while they paraded my work without me, and I felt something tighten in my chest, a slow-burning rage, small, like a candle flame, then roaring to life. This wasn't patience, this wasn't respect, this was a razor, and I wasn't going to let it happen again. Second, I glanced at Mariah, who sat in the back corner, her lips parted in shock. She looked between her father and me, her eyes wide. Raymond's face was an intricate mask of fury and forced composure. "Of course," he said, his voice tight. "Adrian will lead the rollout." I felt his words like a challenge, like a line drawn in the sand. I turned to Eliza and shook her hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes unblinking. "I look forward to it," I said. She gave a curt nod, then turned to gather her team. The Orion execs began to pack up their things, the room suddenly a blur of movement. Martin and Celeste sat frozen, their faces drained of color. I took my seat again, my hands steady now. Raymond leaned in close, his voice a low growl. "You better be ready to deliver," he said, his teeth clenched. I met his glare without flinching. "I always was," I said, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just a pawn in his game, I was a player, and the board was finally shifting in my favor. 3 hours later, I found myself in the HR conference room. It was smaller than the main boardroom, but the tension inside felt like it could crack the walls. Raymond sat at the head of the table, his expression carved from granite, lips pressed into a thin, controlled line. Martin and Celeste flanked him like guards, their eyes fixed on me with a mixture of accusation and something close to fear. Mariah sat at the far end, hands folded in her lap, eyes darting between us